Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello, good evening, and welcome back to Teachers Talk Radio on this lovely Monday evening, where many of you will still be enjoying the dying embers of your holiday, and I hope you're making the most of it and whatever it is you're doing. This is a special pop-up one-off show where we are going to be delving into disciplinary literacy in primary schools with a special guest who we'll introduce in just a moment. And the show this evening is supported by Hachette Learning. So I'll give them a plug as well later on in terms of exploring their incredible range of titles, one of which we're going to be talking about tonight. Welcoming my incredible co-host, Huma. How are you this evening, Huma?
I'm doing very well, Tom. How are you?
Excellent. Not too bad. The sun is out, can't complain. I'm sure many people maybe are starting to worry about GCSE results day. We won't talk about that tonight, everyone. We're gonna close that box. We're going to talk about the teaching, the learning, the stuff that we're all going to be doing this academic year. When do you start back, Huma? Do you know you got your date in your mind, or are you sort of blanking it out?
I think I may be wrong, but I think it's the 4th of September.
Ooh, not bad.
Yeah.
So I think for me it's actually next week for some inset days. So
yeah,
happy days. But it's been a good summer, so I can't complain. Anyway, should we crack on with this? So we're going to be. I'm going to bring on in about 10 seconds. I wish I had like a drum roll sound effect. I don't. Doesn't work. I'm going to bring on the Executive Director of Education at an Academy Trust, a writer of books, many books, for educators, parents, children, you name it. This person has done it. It is Shareen Wilkinson. Shareen, welcome to Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, welcome. It's so good to see you all, and thanks for the introduction, Tom. I think that summarises it well.
Brilliant. Well, as I mentioned, the aim tonight is to talk about disciplinary literacy in primary schools. So, Shareen, I guess my first question is going to be an obvious one for anybody out there. What is disciplinary literacy? What does it mean? What's it all about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about the book. I just thought I'd just show the book there so you can see it. But yes, I think that's important, because when I first introduced disciplinary literacy, and Huma, you know, when I first introduced the concept, I think you were there at one of the conferences. People just look at you like, what is she talking about? They have no clue whatsoever what they're talking about. And disciplinary literacy is basically, how do you read, write, and speak within the discipline? So how do you speak like a historian? How do you speak like a scientist, a geographer? And actually, there are key differences between them. So, for example, if you're reading in English, you're thinking about the characters, you're thinking about the actions and how they feel. You're making predictions and inferencing, and then you're drawing on your background knowledge, which is really important for reading. But if you're reading in history, and I know, Tom, you'll know a lot about history, actually, you need to be looking at...
I try to know a lot. Every week in school, I'm like, I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I'll come back to you, to year sevens. I'll come back to you.
That's a very humble response, Tom. But actually, in history, you're looking at similarity and difference. You might look at why person is significant. You might be interpreting and seeing how historians have interpreted events, and you might be looking at cause and consequence. And so approaching a text or writing a text in history is going to be very different to how you do that in English. And there's no reason why you can't do that with younger children before secondary.
And yes, Shareen, I have to mention this, that, the very, very first time that I came across your work was at the Oxford Research Ed Conference. And I think this was about 3 years ago. So I believe that your journey and your research into this book started then. And I was one of the people sitting in the audience listening to you speak, and I was in awe of your knowledge and the depth and the clarity in which you explained what disciplinary literacy is. So being here now with Tom and you and talking about this incredible book that you have written, it's a rather special moment. And I believe I was the first one to get the hands on the book and to read it. So that makes it I feel very privileged at the moment. So, thank you for being on the show. I am going to dive straight in with my first question. And in your book, you have mentioned that in 2020, you attended a session by Professor Timothy Shanahan on disciplinary literacy, and that sort of sparked your journey into researching this topic. So what was the biggest insight that you took from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. If we think back to 2020, it was the pandemic at the time. I think my son at that time was 6 months old. So I was on maternity leave, or not extended leave. I wasn't even maternity leave. It was just until we could, get back to work, etc. And I watched the webinar and I was completely amazed. And I thought, I never really thought about it in that level of depth. I never really thought that we might read differently in English to how we read in history or how we read in science. So that sparked it. And it was the point where he talked about the different ways that we use grammar and how we write and how we talk that I completely was blown over by it all, and that sparked it. But also teachers were saying to me, Shareen, can you do some research around how you read and how you write across the curriculum, particularly writing? And so I searched everywhere. I read academic papers, I looked at books, and I couldn't find anything that was specific to primary. And I felt there was a real gap in the market. And so that's what I've done. I've written the book that I wanted to read back in 2020. So that's kind of how it's come about, that was the gap that I really wanted to fill.
That's really, really interesting. And, there may be some sort of people, critiques out there who may feel that we are adding one more layer of complexity to our primary curriculum. And when you meet teachers who are skeptical of this new sort of way of teaching foundation subjects, how do you respond to them?
Yeah, people probably won't like my response, but I'm going to give my response. My question, and I have had somebody say the primary curriculum is packed and we've got lots to do, etc. And my question is always, what else are you doing that enriches your pupils, that develops their subject knowledge, that deepens their background knowledge, that's key for reading comprehension? What is more important? And I think for me, I don't try to convince them, because if they're not teaching a deep and meaningful curriculum that enables children to speak and talk within the discipline and really, argue within the discipline, really think about, do I agree with that? Do I not? Do I think critically about it? Then what else are they doing? And is it meaningful? So that's the first thing. And when people book me, I always say, are your teachers on board? Because it's up to you. If you want an excellent curriculum, you have to have it. And the next thing I say is, where I work, we've had 4 Ofsted inspections. It's not about Ofsted, of course, it's not all about that. But what we're doing is not harming it. So all of those schools, 4 of those, got outstanding. Our results are way above the national average and for what you call so-called disadvantaged pupils. So for me, I know it works. My teachers love it. And most of all, the children sell it. The children love it. They can tell you, they have deep knowledge of the curriculum. They can tell you what then, what they learnt before, what now, what they're currently learning, and what next, what they're going to learn. Sorry for the long answer. I'm going to give you another reason as we go through because I'm really thinking about it now. Um, Everything in the book that I've written is actually in the national curriculum. I haven't actually, what I've done, I think Alex Quigley says it quite nicely. I've distilled the research. I've taken the knowledge and skills from the national curriculum and made it explicit. And that's about the discipline, that's understanding that disciplinary knowledge, that subject specific knowledge that pupils need to know and understand. So for me, disciplinary literacy is about thinking deeply about your subject, about remembering the content of your learning, whether that be history, geography, science, etc. And it enables pupils to make really good progress across the curriculum.
You mentioned the national curriculum, and what I really sort of liked in the way you have written the book and the research that you've done is that you've created a write like a scientist, write like a historian framework. And what inspired you to sort of set it out this way? And you've given examples in the book. I think it's in the appendix. And it's really good for teachers to see. You've provided them with sentence stems. So what inspired you to set it out this way? And if you could add one more discipline to it, which one would it be and why?
I think one of the key things in terms of setting it out that way is that I wanted to make it easier for teachers. In primary in particular, we're so busy. Sometimes we don't have time to think. We're teaching multiple subjects. We've got the same teacher, and I wanted to distill it. I wanted to really break it down. And actually, in practice, when I work with teachers in practice, because I've had a chance to embed this across multiple schools, saying to them, this is what's different about writing in English. So in English, you might use metaphors, similes, figurative language, etc. In science, you might look at scientific vocabulary, you might be writing up experiments. In history, you might be looking at trends over time or cause and consequence. And when you break it down, and they're all in the national curriculum, I wasn't reinventing anything. When you break it down, it actually makes it easier for teachers to take things on board and to really think deeply about what they're providing for their children in terms of writing, reading, and speaking. So that was kind of one of the key aspects, if you like, of why I put it together. What could I add? Oh, I forgot that bit. Sorry, Huma. I could add RE. I think maybe I'll do it because sometimes every now and again I write resources and share them. So I can add RE and what if you're writing like a theologian, what would you be doing? Especially for those of you listening that are in church schools and you do a lot of writing in RE. I think I could do that because what I found in RE is that lots of children are retelling religious stories when actually they should be thinking about how particular religions respond to particular situations. So I think that would be something that I could probably write tomorrow and send it to you. Won't take me long. Oh, Huma, I can't hear you. Just take yourself off mute.
Huma, you're on mute. Huma's on mute. There we go. You're back.
Sorry. I'm glad you mentioned RE because we see that a lot in RE lessons, don't we? That it turns into a storytelling lesson, essentially an English lesson. So it would be really good to add RE as a discipline in your framework. So essentially, you are saying that this framework is giving teachers the clarity to sort of run with it. it's there, and you have those sentence stems that help not only experienced teachers but also new teachers who are NQTs and ECTs. So when I was reading the book, I also had that in mind. How are we going to sort of train our new teachers, our ECTs, in understanding what disciplinary literacy is and how to embed it in the classroom? So now let's talk a little bit about English. You have said that a strong English curriculum underpins disciplinary literacy. So if a school feels that their English curriculum is not quite there, what do they sort of need to fix first? Or could they sort of build the English curriculum and embedding disciplinary literacy within that curriculum together?
Yeah, Huma, you know what? That's a good question, because in the book, consistently I say, get your English curriculum sorted first. I know I say it, and I say it a lot within the book. And I say that deliberately. So the first thing is, and let's kind of get deeper into it, let's dig a little bit deeper into the example. The focus on disciplinary literacy is about thinking deeply about the subject, connecting to what you've already learned, and remembering what you've learned and showing what you know in primary. So, for example, you might do a key inquiry question like, how did the achievements of the Romans in Britain impact modern life today? You just have to go to Bath, however you want to say it, and you can see the impact of Romans there. And children will be learning about that over maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it doesn't matter what curriculum you have. And then they are showing what they know and can do. They are thinking deeply about that topic. They are remembering that topic, and they are writing about it. What they don't have time to do is to then learn how to do capital letters and full stops, how to do paragraphing, how to write formally. They need to learn that in English, and they need to be able to apply those skills. And then the focus in, let's say, the history example I've given is on the content of the history. The feedback on the writing is on the content of the writing and whether they've written like a historian. Children get it. Some teachers really struggle with that concept, because what they want to do is they want to correct the spelling, they want to correct the handwriting, and that's fine for young children, I think, because we're not going to be too pedantic. You're just learning how to write in year 1. But once we're getting into year 3, 4, 5, and 6, it should be about application of what you've learned in English, freeing up your cognitive load so that you can focus on the content. And the children love it. They say, Mrs. Wilkinson, I love writing in history because I can focus on the content. I'm not focused on the paragraphing. I can just apply it, but I can show off what I know and can do. So my answer to your question, it's a kind of a long one, is can it be fixed at the same time? So can you work on English and work on history? You could, but then you need to focus in on what you feel is important. And sometimes you overwhelm staff if you're doing too many things. And I think it's important that you break things down, you do things step by step. So get it right in English, apply those skills into English, and focus in on that content, that deep learning in history or geography or science. So that would be my response.
Shareen, does that mean more time on English as opposed to other subjects? Or are you simply saying start with disciplinary literacy in English first and sort that out before moving on to anything else? Just to clarify.
That is what I'm saying. Yeah, really good question, Tom. That is exactly what I'm saying. So, for example, if the children, let's do it in simple layman's terms. If the children haven't got capital letters and full stops, I think that needs to be sorted before we're getting them to do all the content and things. You could, look, that's just my experience. You could do it alongside, and I have seen some schools do it alongside, but it overwhelms the staff. So I think we just need to be careful about doing things step by step, or what Rosenshine says,
breaking things down into smaller chunks, and adults need that as well. But yeah, absolutely, make sure you're teaching paragraphs, you're teaching formal writing, informal writing, so that the children can apply it, because the focus in the foundation subjects is not on that. The focus is on the content, the writing like a scientist, historian, geographer.
Just very quickly, Shareen, how would you timetable this within your timetable? Because I was reading in your book, and you have mentioned that I think once a term, correct me if I'm wrong, that
Yes.
your history lesson should be taught within that English lesson, and an English lesson should be done in the afternoon to sort of embed disciplinary literacy. So schools where, who have not yet embedded disciplinary literacy, what advice would you give to them regarding timetabling it within,
Yeah, so I give, I think, 3 case studies. So we've got 3 case studies in the book. And the one thing I've learned about disciplinary literacy in primary is that there's no right or wrong way of doing it. These are just the ways that I've trialed and I've found that work within schools. But what the idea is that the children have to learn content first. So they might be doing 6 weeks worth of history learning, they might be doing some retrieval practice, etc. By the end of that 6 weeks, 8 weeks, however long it is, you might be doing interleaving, whatever, however your curriculum is, because the book is, it doesn't matter what curriculum you have. I'm not advocating for any particular curriculum. Whatever you're doing, the disciplinary writing becomes part of your assessment. So it shows how the children are thinking, remembering what they know, what they can do. So you might not be doing a piece of history writing or geography writing. You might only be doing that 3 times a year. You might only have 3 pieces of history writing and 3 pieces of geography writing a year. But what we want is, we want that ethic of excellence. So we don't want that scrackly work. This is what I find, the work in science and history, I've looked at them like when I do my little book looks, and sometimes they're horrendous. And what we want is high quality work across the curriculum. So for that end assessment, you might move your English to the afternoon, or you might make it part of your English curriculum. And in the morning, for 2 or 3 mornings, you don't need it for as long, because you've taught children how to plan, you taught children how to do paragraphs, you've taught that in English, they're applying it now. So it could be 2 or 3 days at the end of the 6 weeks. That's when they do the writing. But we say in the morning, we learnt that from the primary knowledge curriculum, that trust, they're absolutely amazing. And that's when the children are fresh. And it means that the children think that this piece of writing is important because it's in the English time, it's in the morning, and the quality of writing, I tried to sort of put scans in the book of different, is phenomenal. Like the quality of writing in history, geography, science is just as good quality as English, because you've given it that priority. But it's not every single week. It's not English. It's 3 times a year or once a year if it's too much for you in terms of your curriculum.
Thank you for explaining that so beautifully, Shareen, because I think there is some misconception amongst teachers that writing should be done every single day. And writing in history and geography and foundation subjects, every lesson needs to have a piece of written work in their books. But in your book, you also tie this all up very closely with metacognition. So, and I also really liked your 7-step model. I think you've taken it from the Education Endowment Foundation, about making thinking visible. So which step do you think teachers most often skip, and what impact does it have? And, for those who sort of don't know the 7-step model, it is mentioned in Shareen's book. So thank you for putting that in the book, Shareen. But yes, can you please explain what impact does it have?
Yeah, I mean, the 7-step models from the Education Endowment Foundation Metacognition publication, which is incredibly useful, and it sort of breaks things down really lovely. And for me, disciplinary literacy is so linked to metacognition. What you're doing is you're making the invisible visible. You're showing what it means to be a historian, what it means to be a geographer, scientist, artist, mathematician, and you're breaking down the knowledge and skills that you want children to be able to use, and you're modeling that process for children so that they can make rapid progress in those subjects. And for those of you not as familiar with metacognition, it's about children being able to plan, do, and review. And a part of metacognition is this notion of explicit instruction. And to simplify it, like Fisher and Frey just say, I do, we do, you do. So I do it, I model, you get a nice piece of paper and you model the piece, right? Oh, I'm thinking I'm going to write a capital letter at the beginning of my thing. Or, if you're doing history, I'm going to think about why this person's particularly significant. It's going to look slightly different in the subjects, and that's where you need to model, you need to show exactly what the children know. Then you do it together and you gradually release, because you can't scaffold forever. And I know Alex Fairlamb's done a wonderful book on scaffolding. So I find in the last 20 years, now I've been in education for 23 years, this will be my 24th year, people still miss out the I do. They still, or what they do is they show this beautiful piece of writing that has been already created and say, here's your model. But what you've got to do is you've got to articulate your thought process. I'm going to use this metaphor. I'm doing Key Stage 2 deliberately because disciplinary literacy is mainly Key Stage 2. You build the foundations, obviously, for Key Stage 1, but Key Stage 2 is where you're really teaching it. And you're really, if it's in English, you're really modeling your process. I'm going to use this metaphor because I want it to have this impact on the reader. I'm going to do this, and you're articulating your thought process. And for me, that's the bit that's often missed. If I want to be in a school and I want to really improve things, I'll start off with I do, we do, you do, which isn't new. It's been around for years.
Now, we have used it consistently in our school, and I love that model. And you're absolutely right. I have been in lesson observations where teachers have got a perfect, well-written model up on the board, and they miss out that element of live modeling, which is so important, not only in English, but also in foundation subjects. So, Tom, how does that apply to you guys in secondary school? Is that how you teach history? Do you apply the I do, we do, you do model?
Yeah. Modeling's obviously important. Scaffolding, modelling. As much as possible, history as an example, I'll sort of essay write live with the students where I can. Obviously, you're opening yourself up there because you're putting yourself on the spot a little bit. But obviously, you want them to engage with the way you're thinking and the way you're identifying your own mistakes. Sometimes that can take a little bit more time than if you wrote it in advance or got an AI engine to do it for you, because you're doing it on the spot. But there's probably very little that's better than that. And then obviously the process of when you pass it over to them, have you done it together? Have you then allowed them a chance to get feedback on how they're doing as they're going through it? So it's probably going to be very similar, if not exactly the same. The way, if I was a primary school teacher, I'd probably teach in a similar way. But
Absolutely.
I say teach in a similar way, maybe not in terms of my approach, but in terms of the actual methodology, probably similar.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's exactly. I think it's very similar, and I think it's across all subjects as well. It's not just English, it's all subjects: art, DT, history, geography, etc. So it's applicable. And I think the disciplinary literacy book is also a distillation. It's a bringing things together and connecting things and saying, actually, if you're doing metacognition, this is a metacognitive approach. So it's not making too many new things, I think.
Now, Shareen, one of the chapters that sort of really stood out for me in the book is chapter 2, where you sort of explore equality, diversity, and standard English. So we know that in a classroom, we have pupils that come from different backgrounds, they have different dialects, some of them are EAL learners. How do you think teachers can then celebrate their voices while teaching the formal English that children need, that they need when they are writing in their lessons?
Huma, I'm so glad that you've mentioned that, because I spent ages on that chapter. It's such a difficult topic, and actually everybody I mentioned and talked about it were interested in it. It was so interesting because it was this whole debate around standard English and how we include those who might not be perceived to be using standard English. So, I mean, I'm going to talk about it as we go along, and I'm sure we've all got our viewpoints. But I'm a massive fan of code switching, and I've learnt that a lot along the way. I've learnt to say things in a particular way. Now, it's personal to me because I'm from South London. I also have Caribbean heritage, and I say things in a certain way. And there's been this massive stigma around if I haven't said it using the correct English, etc. And so I don't want pupils to feel like they don't belong and that they can't be their authentic self. But at the same time, though, I feel like in terms of standard English, you need to know standard English. It's in the national curriculum anyway. But if you're going for a job, let's just take like an example. If you're going for a job, for example, and you said, "Yeah, bro, I'll come for a job in it." All right, just an example, yeah. Unless you're going for Cast of EastEnders or the next kind of episode or the next bit of Top Boy, you're not really going to get the job. So you've got to, I feel, and it's personal to me, you've got to learn standard English, but you've also got to appreciate that in different situations you can be authentic, and that's okay. So for me, I think in that chapter I came to, let's not have a stigma about different dialect or different accents or the way that you say things. Let's embrace it. But we also need to teach children standard English so that they know when to use it when it's appropriate. So those are the kind of things I've been thinking about. I don't know, Huma, you might have some more questions on that, and we can delve into that.
Yes, I do have quite a few questions on that, but I wanted to mention something really interesting that I read in your book, and you talk about, I think you've referenced Halliday, and
Yes.
he talks about how pupils should be given grammar of choice. So that's a really interesting concept where you teach children that they may change their spoken grammar when they're outside the classroom, but when they write, they need to use standard English to write. And that sort of ties in with what you've said, that it's totally okay for them to use their own accents, their own dialect, the way they speak outside the classroom. But when they're writing, they need to be given that grammar of choice. They need to be taught that. And what do you say? What do you have to say about that?
Absolutely. I think they do need to learn. If you think of the end of year 6, and I know, Huma, you're a year 6 teacher,
Yeah.
in order to be a greater depth writer, you've got to be able to use different levels of formality. You've got to be able to write really formally all the way through, but you also might use informal dialogue. So you might, be the character of the mother, and then you switch, you say, "Oh dear," and you'll say things in a different way. You might want to show somebody else that maybe uses non-standard English, and you know that that's in dialogue because that's the language of speech. But in writing, you want to be much more formal. And so it's already in the national curriculum. If you do the grammar test, not I'm not advocating for the grammar test. I'm just mentioning the grammar test, which will probably open a can of worms. There are questions in there that ask you to identify which sentence is far more formal. So children do need to know the difference between informal and formal language anyway in the national curriculum. It's in the national curriculum. But it is about, and Halliday's one of them. I also looked at Basil Bernstein as well, because I was looking at the theory, etc., etc. It is about using language in different contexts where appropriate, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you were talking about celebrating different dialects, but some teachers might worry that if we sort of celebrate different dialects, pupil might not fully master standard English for exams in, future careers. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think it's not saying that you don't teach standard English, because I think you should. It's about not adding the stigma. For me, it's about not feeling that that what you say is wrong. Now, I've personally experienced it. As I said before, with my Caribbean heritage, I actually say I've realised from my grandmother, I actually say certain things in a Caribbean way, and I hadn't actually realised, but I do. And also from South London, I do say, I say tend to, I say like I do, it does come out, and I've had people correct me to say that I'm wrong, and that doesn't make you feel like you belong, and that makes you feel like what you're doing is wrong and you don't belong here. But what I would like to do is I would like to empower pupils to know how to use standard English, so that when they need to, they can. I don't think it's good enough to then say, oh, well, that's the way they speak, just leave them to it. This is about social justice here. When you're giving children that language, you're helping them in terms of progression and helping them in terms of even social mobility. And whether we agree with that or not, it doesn't really matter, because that's how society runs. So yeah, go on, Tom. Thought you'd throw something in.
No, I was only just thinking now, like my mum would always say to my brother and I, that's one she always corrected. If she's watching this, because I always used to say my brother and me.
Yeah.
I just made her corrections she always did with us, my brother and I.
Yes.
And the other one she always used to correct was like, because we're in the northwest near Liverpool, Merseyside, people, especially when we were teenagers, we'd say like all the time. It's like, I don't know, mate. It's just like. She'd always be correct in that. And she would say, she probably would say, that's wrong. Don't say that, or maybe not in those ways, but it's so I guess what I'm asking is, where's the line, I guess, between, because are you saying not my mother in particular, but people in those situations shouldn't sort of say that's wrong? They should just say that's okay, that's a dialect, and get on with it?
No, I think they should be corrected. And so that's how I grew up. So where I grew up, with the first part of where I grew up was on a council estate. Okay, so I know what it's like to be on a council estate and everyone saying in it. And I also know what it's like for my mother to say, don't you dare say that. She's probably listening. Thank you, Mum. You taught me well, and that helped with social mobility. I also went to some very good schools in very posh areas as well, so I kind of learned both. So I can sort of code switch and go between the two. So I've had both experiences, and I think we should correct children. And people will disagree with me, and I think we should correct children, but we mustn't make them feel bad about where they're from or where they've got it from. Perhaps the approach is, yes, when you're with your friends, etc., but in this situation, you need to use standard English. And perhaps that's the approach. But that, for me, that's just my personal experience of growing up, part of my childhood on a council estate. And actually, I've made that social mobility journey. I can't claim to be working class anymore. I'm very much middle class now, but you need to be able to negotiate and be in different situations and you do need to support children if they want to be able to do that, because it is that social justice aspect, and they do need to be confident when they're going for job interviews, etc. So I suppose I'm with your mum, Tom.
Shireen, in
I
your
think
book,
children need to know the difference and use it when they can, so that they have the power and control over their language.
so in your book, you've mentioned that asking pupils to adopt subject-specific language can sometimes make them put their sort of identity on hold. So based on what you've just said, how can then schools avoid, how can schools sort of build that strong academic language and avoid making, children feel like they don't belong?
Yeah, I think in the book I've addressed this, and the answer that I've given in the book, I think one of the things about the book is that I haven't given one narrative. So what I've done is I've looked at the critiques, unpicked them, researched them, established them, acknowledged them, and then said, but actually, they do need to learn standard English. So I think my response in the book is, actually, when children are presenting in assemblies, because we're thinking about primary, when they're going for job interviews, they need to learn standard English. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to have the stigma. We need to be aware of it. We don't want to have, like I've had in the past, not realizing that actually some of the words I say are actually in a Caribbean way. And I've realized that, and I'm proud of my heritage. I'm not going to hide. I think it makes me, it makes me unique. And I'm proud of that. So in the book, I do say they do need to learn it, but we need to be conscious that we're not stigmatizing where they're from. I think that was my answer in the book. Oh, Huma, just put yourself on. Tom, I can't hear you, or Huma.
What advice would you give to teachers who are sort of worried about
I can't
correcting
hear Tom.
people's language without knocking
Yeah.
their confidence?
Yeah, I mean, you just, if they're young children, you can just say it back to them, I didn't do nothing. You can say, oh, you didn't do anything. You can do it in that sort of way. You don't have to say, that's really bad, don't speak like that. You can say, oh, you didn't do. I think saying things, I can't remember the official term because it changes every decade. But I think saying things back to children correctly, there's nothing wrong with that with young children. I think they need to learn how to say it properly in the first place, and then if they choose not to. But Tom, you were on mute, so I don't know if you had some sort of wisdom there.
I didn't. I was only going to say that we've had 500 viewers so far joining the show, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for tuning in to Teachers Talk Radio. We're talking about Shareen Wilkinson's new book, Disciplinary Literacy in Primary Schools. And if you want to get it, you can head over to Hachette Learning, the website. And I think, Shareen, it comes out in 4 days' time. But you can pre-order it. You can pre-order it. So get over there.
Yeah, it's on Friday. It can come. I've got a competition running on X if you want to join to get a copy. But yes, you can order it on Friday and it will come. But yeah, I'm interested to know what the viewers think actually of standard English. So do connect with me on social media. I think it's a discussion to be had. I think.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so let's go back to disciplinary literacy and let's look at history. So in history, what one change can a teacher make tomorrow to help their pupils speak and write like historians?
Yeah, I'm glad you've asked that question. It's a really tricky one. I think I've upset people along the way when I've done this, when I show what's history writing and what's not history writing. The biggest thing I see, I would say, particularly in history, is I see a lot of English in history. And the one change I would make is think about, in terms of task design, think about what you're asking pupils to write. So in history, if you're writing a diary from the point of view of Mary Seacole, just take year 2, or you're writing a diary from someone in World War II, or what I've seen is you're drawing it's no disrespect. I saw this in year 6. It's just, and the teachers know, so it, I'm not, they didn't know at the time, so I'm appreciating what they did, but they drew a suitcase and then they asked children to write if they were evacuated in World War II, what would they take with them? So it's lovely, but it's not thinking deeply about history.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
English, so they're just replicating English across the curriculum. It's not remembering what they know and that deep and rich curriculum. And actually, the biggest thing I say when I see things like suitcases, or I see wanted posters, I see lots of wanted posters in history. And the biggest thing that I say is that if you're doing a wanted poster and you've done a description, is that what you want, what you would want in English? Or is a description more suitable for year 1 pupils? Because that's where it is, using adjectives, and then in year 2, expanded noun phrases. So is that high quality writing for year 5 and 6 children? Probably not.
No.
And wanted posters weren't even around when people were doing them, so it's not authentic either.
Yeah.
They didn't come around till much later. So if you're writing in history, if we could just get one thing right and you're writing in history, don't feel bad about it. We don't know, it's primary, we've got to teach everything. But make sure they're writing something to do with history. They're looking at why somebody's significant. They're comparing historical events. They're looking at the cause. Why did things happen? What was the impact of the Roman Empire? So they're really thinking deeply with history. And I think, because I've looked at Key Stage 3, because I always look at the progression, I think that will set them up so much better for secondary. And Tom, jump in here, please. Would set them up so much better for that secondary study, because I've looked at the Key Stage 3 knowledge, particularly disciplinary knowledge or the subject specific skills, than if they've just been doing diaries from characters. So really think about your task design, really think about what are you asking them to write, and is it within history or the national curriculum? Just look in the national curriculum, have a look at what it says for history, and that's what you want them to write.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tell me.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I agree with everything you said. I think one of the things that obviously we need to consider across the profession is what support primary history colleagues get in terms of I don't know, subject knowledge or even just what history second, like you said, Key Stage 3 is actually looking for, and what happens later on. But in saying that, I'm not a primary teacher, so I don't know what would be suitable or what wouldn't be suitable. I think if you're talking about the tasks you've just mentioned at Key Stage 3, then yeah, I could give that answer of they're either not suitable, they're filler tasks, or they're homework tasks that are pointless, or they're just whatever. I could give you a list. But at primary level, I don't. The honest answer is I don't know. I mean, is there more space for creativity? I don't know whether that falls into that bracket. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it just bad history at primary? I mean, it may well be. Someone like Ben Walsh will probably have something to say here. I interviewed him.
It's fine. I mean,
I'll send him this clip and he'll be like, Tom, this is what he'll tell me. But I don't know.
Yeah. Of course there's space for creativity, of course, with young children, of course there is. And you can we've got some beautiful history writing, and you can do like artwork to go with it, etc. And you can make it very, very primary. And actually you can write diaries, and I say this in the book quite clearly, but do it in English, because it's the English discipline. And Huma, I don't know what you think about that, but you're thinking deeply, and you're having high expectations for pupils. And actually, if you're expecting children to just list objects that they're going to take with them when they're evacuated from World War II, and they're in year 6 and they can write paragraphs, that's low expectations for our pupils.
Honestly, Shareen, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And you have mentioned some case studies in your book, and they give fantastic examples. And as a Year 6 teacher, I feel that you need to sort of dive into it when you're writing in history, and not just talk about diary entries and suitcases and list things. They really need to have that background knowledge of what they're writing about before they delve deep into the writing process, isn't it? It's building their schema, and you have talked about that a lot in your book. So, the case studies that you've written, I found them really interesting, and the one after chapter 2 gives some fantastic examples of what they have used in their schools on how to embed disciplinary literacy in foundation subjects like history. So I'm not going to give it all away, because I think our listeners should get the book, read through it, and sort of engage with what you are saying in that book, and then take all the suggestions and recommendations that you've given and try and embed them in their classroom. So I'm not going to give it away, but when I read like you, Shareen. I've got my little post-it notes, and I've really sort of found it so useful, and thinking of my own teaching practice, of what I'm going to take into the classroom in September. So it has been really, really, really useful. Just give us, an example of talking about history still. Give us an example of a best example of authentic historical piece of writing that you have seen in one of the schools that you have worked with.
Yeah, I've just seen some good. I might have even put a QR code in terms of the writing, but it's I saw a really fabulous example from Sonia Thompson's school in Birmingham, where they talked about I think it was about trends over time, and how things had happened over time, and just such high expectations for their pupils. And within our own trust, we set out, so it's deliberately considered, so it's linked to what the children are learning, and then I think I've put it in the book, but we set out key questions that we want children to answer by the end of their learning, if you like. And like we talked about, how does the Roman Empire impact on Britain, which I talked about before. And then the writing is just, whenever I do training and I show the writing, I always have this gasp, and like, and especially when, and Tom, you were talking about secondary, and especially when secondary teachers see it, they're like, wow, the children are actually learning this level and are able to do that, and we need to build on that. One thing I do say in the book, though, is that I'm not doing secondary in primary. So some people might go ahead. I'm not going ahead. I'm keeping within the primary, so they've got things to learn when they get to secondary, but I'm making sure that they can build on what they've already learned as they get into Key Stage 3. I loved writing the book, and you talked about the case studies, and I thought so deeply about what would be useful. So in the case studies, we've got people from the north of England, from the Midlands, from South, from Surrey. We've got one form entry schools, because they're special. I've taught in a year one form entry. It's hard work because you've got to do everything, so that's quite exhausting. We've got a Key Stage 1 teacher, because I think teacher voice is important. Everybody's from a school or a multi-academy trust. And we've also got a case study from my trust as well, because I think it's important that I've put it in practice, and I'm not just saying the theory, but I've actually done it over years and put it in practice, and it's embedded. And we will be, and I can announce it on Teachers Talk Radio, we will be doing discovery days in our trust, and you'll be able to come and see disciplinary literacy in practice, because that's how you impact on others and support the system, because it's not just about our trust, it's about pupils. And if you're thinking about how people are doing, you need to impact on others. it's a social thing. It's about other people as well, and other pupils can benefit.
That's fantastic, Shareen. I would love to come to one of your schools and see it in practice. And one of the other things that I also wanted to mention is that you have given such excellent ideas, in this chapter, and I think it is chapter 3 of how to put, disciplinary literacy in practice in the classroom. So it's a really interesting chapter, this one as well, where we have given classroom techniques on how to embed disciplinary talk in the classroom as well. And that is so important, because I feel that as a year 6 teacher, and I've worked in different year groups as well, what children find increasingly different in this day and age is their ability to articulate themselves, to talk. So the fact that you have, written in depth about disciplinary talk and the different types of talk that could be used in the classroom, it's very interesting, and I think all teachers should read that.
Absolutely. I've spent years working on that. It looks really simple in the book, but I've put it together. I've looked at the curriculum. I've met subject specialists. I've, had training from the Historical Association, the Geographical Association, RE Today. Like, that's a combination of years of work, just, putting it. Sometimes someone has to do it.
Yeah.
We don't always have time, but someone has to sit and think deeply about things and put that in practice. So that took me years to put together, and then I trialed it with children. And can I just say that children helped me with it as well? I after the pandemic, I was based in one school, so I wasn't across all of our 12 schools, and I trialed it. I taught children. I got to teach in year 6 again, which was fabulous. And I trialed it with the children. So I feel like it's coming from a very strong place and a trialed place that hopefully will be really useful for schools.
I also like the fact that you mentioned earlier on, that you asked the children to help you create the, speak like a historian or write like a historian posters. And that is so great, to get the children involved in something like this. And you've thought of almost everything. You've covered every aspect. And I was also looking at how you have included, ideas from a speech and language therapist who talks about how to support pupils with speech and language difficulties, and getting them to, I think she's given some really interesting suggestions on how to get them to talk, to get them involved, rather than them just sitting on the sidelines and listening, but getting really involved in the disciplinary talk in the classroom. So some really fantastic ideas in this book, Shareen. A huge well done to you to put it together, and it's going to be such a useful book for teachers. And I would encourage everyone to get Shareen's book and read through it, not just skim read it, but read it properly like I do, because there are lots of useful pearls of wisdom, I should say, in this book. So
yeah, if Huma is recommending the book, Shareen, that's the gold standard recommendation, because unlike sort of a lot of teachers in education who sort of buy 50 books and then read like one of them, and then the second and third they'll read like a paragraph, and the rest of them they don't read, they just sit on the shelf and they take pictures of them all. Huma actually reads them properly with
Thank you, Huma, for reading the book. It's my
seal of approval. right?
Yeah, it's true. Huma, thank you so much. I think I really love your feedback, and I think this is just the first book. I had to sort of set the standard, do the research. It's got the theory in it. I had to do the theory because I couldn't find anything on it. So it's almost like the first book there for primary, and I'm really open to writing a second book. I'll be listening, doing podcasts, and I'll be listening to what people would want next. So I'm not going to propose a book straight away. I'm going to listen to the sector, listen to primary teachers, and then write a book that you need. So this one, I was listening to teachers when I wrote this one, and then I know there's a second one there somewhere where I can address or go into depth with furthermore. But I've absolutely enjoyed speaking to you, Tom and Huma, and to the listeners, and I hope it will be really useful. And it's coming from a place of really being passionate about reading and writing, about English, and also about curriculum, which is the area I lead in my multi-academy trust.
That is great. It's been great talking to you. But just one more question from me before
No problem.
we sort of round up. So what's the one change in classroom practice you'd most like to see in the next 5 years to really move this agenda forward?
Yeah, I think it's mentioned in the MPQLs. So the leading literacy, it's mentioned there. It's mentioned in the EEF. It's mentioned in the proposed new Ofsted framework. So it's all mentioned at policy level. But for me, it's about in the curriculum really talking about subject-specific language, oral language, and vocabulary, and making sure we're explicit in every subject. Really making it explicit that we're arguing within the discipline. We understand how historians, scientists, etc. argue. That would be a piece. And also just analysing and interrogating text with a disciplinary lens, I think would be something quite good at a national level. And then if we're lucky, and I'm not stipulating this for everybody, that we'd start to write within the discipline, particularly in Key Stage 2, but I wouldn't necessarily make that a national thing that everyone has to do, because I think English needs to be embedded first for some schools. Not all, but some schools need to get their English right first. Thank you for that. It's a good question. That's what I'd like to see.
Thank you so much, Shareen. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thanks so much, Huma and Tom.
Same from my side. We've had nearly 700 live watchers. We've had quite a few people interacting as well on social media. So thank you to Stuart and Zoe and Nick and who else? And Mr. G and Teresa and various other people who've been commenting or just retweeting or liking or whatever.
Thank you so much for everyone's support. I'm happy to have the conversation on social media and to continue, and let's start a debate if you want to, but yeah, I'm passionate about it.
We like debates, don't we, Tom?
Yeah, we do. We love a good debate. Listen, it's been fantastic. So this will be available as a podcast soon after, and anybody who's just joined in the last 5 minutes, you can obviously watch it back on YouTube or LinkedIn or X or any of the other places we've been streaming out to this evening, or you can wait for the podcast to come out if you prefer audio only. That'll be available in a couple of days' time. Bottom line, follow, like, subscribe, Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you very much, Hachette Learning, for supporting this show, and of course, a special thanks to Shareen for coming on, giving up her time to talk about her fantastic new book, which is out on the 22nd of August. Head over to the Hachette Learning website, grab the book. We'll be back. In fact, I say we'll be back. Bijesh and Claire are actually on now. So right now. So, don't leave. Don't leave. Go follow Teachers Talk Radio, and on X, you can find this show with Bijesh and Claire, which has just started, where they're actually talking about assessment for the year 25-26 academic year. And Shareen, I feel like you're frantically holding up your book like you want to wave it again, so feel free to do so. And we'll see everybody soon. Take care, everyone. Goodbye and good night.
Take care. Thank you so much. Take care.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, a world-class
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.